Is now a good time to buy a car? That's a question I keep hearing over and over and over again. And yes, the short answer is yes. Long answer is, well, maybe not as much. But we're going to talk about that because clearly things are changing. The market is constantly evolving. And we're hearing this, the market's bubbles bursting and the car market, when is it crashing? You hear some YouTubers say, oh, it's crashing, the bubble's bursting. But then you go down to the dealership and you look at the prices on the windows and there's no amendments and the dealers quite often aren't moving on their prices. You go to try to buy a Toyota and the prices are still sticker and no more money deducted off of that. And you just look around and you can't help but wonder, prices aren't going down. Is this the right time to buy a car? Well, long and short of it is, things are changing. This market is evolving. And we saw back, a few short years ago, not just the evolution, but sort of that change up in the market from what we thought was reasonably priced vehicles, of course, being adjusted for inflation every single year over year. From about 2015 to 2019, it felt like just kind of a traditional 3 to 4%, 5% increase year over year on the price of the vehicle. And that seemed to align with inflation. It was more or less very, very similar. But then we hit 20 and 21. Shortages start to happen. Chips were nowhere to be found. And of course, unfortunately, neither were cars. You couldn't buy a new car because chip shortages and rationing, and even buying used cars became scarce too because a lot of the new cars were no longer available. So customers were looking for new, they couldn't get them. So then they started looking at used. That drove prices up on the used and the whole market went to crap. So ultimately, you had a situation where it peaked around the fall of 2022, where all of a sudden we just realized that, hang on, I've never seen prices this crazy. Well, and then lots of YouTubers come along and they're screaming and shouting and saying all these crazy things. But let's be honest, a lot of them were noise and it's all headlines and it's all for naught. A lot of these YouTubers were just making a lot of noise just to try to get views. And it worked to some point. You look back now and what's changing, and they're still trying to shout, but the views aren't there like they used to be. And so why is that? Is it because cars aren't cheap and people are calling them out? Or is it in fact because these people they're too busy shouting and they can't be heard anymore because of all the noise? So whatever it is this the time to buy a car? Well, we've talked about this before, first of all, on a seasonal perspective. As we round out the year, that's usually a better time to buy. Holiday season, here, the year end coming up here right away. We know by the end of the year, we're looking at incentives. There's going to be a lot of options for pricing. Dealers are going to be looking at giving their vehicles away. They're going to try to bring in next year the 26s, and they're still trying to unload 25s, and there's still 24s on the lot in some manufacturers. Not too much for Toyota, not too much for Honda, not too much for Acura or Lexus. Certainly lots for Stellantis products, Ram, Dodge, Chrysler. Even their lots are thinning out a little bit. And I've actually been on their lots recently, looking around, doing some shopping, thinking about, hey, is it time to buy a new truck? And looking and realizing that, wait a minute, even the Stellantis dealers are way down on inventory. It's not what I saw back in 2022, 23, and when I was, kind of doing some of these videos last year, the early spring of last year and beyond. It was pretty obvious to me with all of this inventory on the car lots that things were not selling. And at least for Stellantis, but the other brands they were. So it was quite obvious that Stellantis and Jeep, Ram, Dodge, Chrysler were an outlier. Other than that, everybody was selling like hotcakes. But I found something interesting as well. Being on Stellantis lots recently, I'm starting to see a lot of thinner inventory, a lot less. I couldn't find any Challengers, Chargers. I couldn't find any or very few Jeeps like Grand Cherokees. I couldn't find even a lot of Wranglers. There's sporadic amounts of inventory out there right now. Rams, a lot of the half tons are gone. I mean, there's a few HD trucks, 2500s. They were always tough sellers, 3500s. But generally, a lot of manufacturers are thinned right out. However, there are certain manufacturers that aren't selling all that great. And while Stellantis seems to be seeing a little bit of success because of all of the incentives, they're trying to pitch a lot of their cars. We're seeing brands like Nissan, their lots, again, not totally full. They have some inventory, but they're not loaded up because they've been incentivizing and people are buying them. So if people are buying cars, it's going to be hard to negotiate, right? If cars are moving, it's all supply and demand. So these car lots that don't have a lot of inventory, it's going to be tougher to walk in there and say, look, there's 2 trucks like that. I want that one. And then they're going to say, well, we only have two left, and sorry, no negotiations here, pal. That's what it's going to be. But there's one manufacturer I've seen, GM these days, and GMC, Chevy, they're struggling. And why is that? Well, recalls, we're hearing L87s, we're hearing 5.3s, we're hearing transmission crap, and we're hearing lots of quality problems. Most importantly, we're hearing GM and Chevy just not selling the inventories that they'd like to. Now, they're going to brag and say things are lovely and great, but we already know there's a lot of the electrified market. They're slowly trying to turn that rig around and get back to ICE a little bit more. They see the writing on the wall and they really want to exploit that market. And they're even talking about possibly coming out with something that's a different V8 engine because they know that they almost need to leave the 6.2 and the 5.3 in the rearview mirror, pardon the pun. I mean, it's interesting when you see the 5.5s and the 6.2s that are in the Corvette, the quality control seems to be different departments, different part of the organization, and those cars aren't seeing the same level of problems. Sure, there's that recent recall with the fuel fill up, but that's a relatively, I mean, it's a big one if it happens to you and the vehicle burns to the ground, but it's generally speaking a relatively simple fix. That said, the vast majority of the market right now is thinning out, and I've seen this. I've seen this on every OEM. Jaguar, Range Rover, they're still having a tough time. We know Jaguar's not selling anything. Range Rover's tough. They're always trying to motivate buyers, but what it means is supply and demand are impacting a market, and that's what it always boils down to. So what I noticed is there's a lot less inventory, generally speaking, over the market space of most manufacturers. And what that kind of means is, to me, there's less likely that you're going to get deals. Now, that said, as we roll in the year end, as I've already mentioned, you're probably going to get a bit of a negotiations go in there, maybe a day before Christmas Eve or what have you. You're going to probably get possibly some dollars off sticker, see if these dealers can knock something off. Maybe they're even sometimes giving you better finance rates. That's something that's happening. But floor plan costs are not driving these dealers so much anymore. That was a cost that they were incurring for monthly charges like you when you buy a car and you have to pay monthly charges on interest payments to the bank. They have to pay floor plan costs. But they're not doing as much of that anymore because these vehicles are not sitting on the lot so long. That said, cars like Honda and Toyota, we mentioned, I did a video recently about those cars that are super fast sellers, and they're just clearly not. The dealers are having no problems in getting rid of them. So with that said, this continues going on and on and on demand with the brands like Toyota, Lexus, even Honda and Acura. Acura not as much. Acura is not doing so well, but the rest of them are generally selling like hotcakes. And because of that, you're not getting a deal there either. So the question is this the good time to buy a car? The ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of the market in some cases would suggest this is the time. But realistically, when is the best time to buy a car? Is it right now? Should you be out there hustling right now? Well, let me just kind of summarize this. The best time to buy the car is not even as much dependent on supply and demand anymore. Because what we start to see now is whether you have cash, then they up. If you want to buy cash, then of course they up that cash price of the vehicle. If you want to go financing, then they bury costs in the financing and they spread it out and you end up paying more there. It doesn't matter, you're going to pay, and you're going to pay clearly, significantly. So unless you're buying from a brand that's on the verge of going out of business, potentially like Nissan and Infiniti, the vast majority of the car manufacturers know what they've got, they know the consumers are still buying, and when we see the truck sales are continually climbing, GM, Chevy, and Ford, the big three aren't struggling selling trucks. The fact remains is, if they're selling vehicles, why would they give you incentives? And with the cost of inflationary increases being, 3 to 4% year over year, but we're starting to see these vehicle price increases more like 5 to 8% over year, it's a clear indication that inertia is not changing. Every single year we're seeing prices go up. Not just inflationary increases, sometimes even more than inflationary increases. It's actually rare that you see these OEMs selling cars for the same price for 5 consecutive years. You just don't see that unless they're ending a production run and they're trying to motivate and move a lot of that inventory out, and they're trying to clear out the production line and get ready and tooled up for the next model that's going to come down that line. The majority of the time, you're just strictly going to find increased year over year. And what that generally means is you're not going to get a deal, any better deal in 2 years from now than you would 2 years ago. See, as you've been losing track, you've been losing the war with inflation. The battle with inflation is beating you with your increase in salary increases. The same thing goes with the vehicles. So it's almost the longer you wait, the harder things are going to get. I mean, look at the inflationary adjustment calculator. You can look online. I run that all the time. And I can see we're about 30 to 35% year over total inflationary increase from 10 years ago, when unfortunately we're seeing car prices up about 40, 45% in the same time frame. It's clear that vehicle prices are going faster upwards than even inflation. And on top of it, your wages in general are not keeping up even with inflation, never mind car prices. So the short of it is, the longer you wait, the more you pay. Now, this isn't hurry up and get out there and rush and buy something. Is this the time to buy? I'm going to ask you a couple questions. The only way, in my opinion, and the way that it should really go is it time to buy? One, you have a car that's absolute trash and it's ready for the dumpster and it's unreliable and maybe it's unsafe. You need something and you don't want to pay for a 2-year-old used car that's going for a similar dollar as a brand new replacement, even if it means you can get it now versus waiting for 3 months. Always buy the new ones in today's market if you're dealing with something that's 2 or 3 years old, especially when you're talking about Hondas, Toyotas, Lexus, the better, more renowned brands. That said, it comes down to this. Do you need one? If you don't need one, what's wrong with fixing what you've got? If you do need one, okay, you got to get out there. The next question you have to ask yourself is, what's your needs, what's your wants, and how much is your budget? Don't ask the dealer that. You need to answer that for yourself. Pull up some paper. Here, grab your scrapbook right here. Grab your little scrapbook like this and write some notes. Here, we're just going to write some notes here. And just write down, okay, here we're going to go. All right, how much is my budget? Budget, okay, right there. What kind of car do I need? Okay, and okay, yeah, my needs and my wants. I need transportation and I need to work, but I don't need to haul. Okay, so now you've got your list of criteria and you know how much money you have in the bank. Is it time to buy? It's not time to buy if you've got to borrow money from the bank or the lending institution for more than 4 years. If you're having to look at something that fits your criteria, you said already your needs and your wants need to be met. So you need a car, your current vehicle's not safe. Okay, let's move on from that. What else is the criteria? Okay, your needs and wants. All-wheel drive, that's great. SUV, some all-wheel drive cars. You need that because you have snow on the ground. It's your daily driver. Maybe you have some people, passengers you haul around with. Okay, you need a 4-door, maybe an SUV, trunk space. Do you need to haul? Okay, no? Okay, you probably don't need a big SUV. You can probably get away with a smaller to subcompact SUV and seating for 5. That generally is going to meet the criteria. So that gives you a list of vehicles like Mazdas, the smaller Mazdas and the Toyotas and maybe even some of the Buicks and Chevys. They have products in almost every one of those spaces. So then you have to ask yourself, why would I need to spend 90 grand when I can spend $35,000, $40,000? So you really got to narrow this down. So you find the vehicle, you need it, it meets your criteria. Don't go in there with big eyes and buy a big shiny toy with all the new whizzles and whiz bangs. You need something that's more reliable, right? You want reliable, basic features, has all the safety nannies on board. That's it. Why are you going way over here when this is all you need here? And that's the problem we've been seeing. And people sometimes take their old jalopy, or sometimes people even worse, take their new car that's 3 years old, they're tired of it, they want to trade it in for that new car, and they still owe what appears to be something like $30,000 or 20 grand on negative equity, and they'll trade it in and roll it over, and then they never get out of debt. That's bad news. You should never buy. But you should buy. Is it time to buy? Yes. If you can keep your loan period under 4 years, if you have at least 20% down to put, and on top of it, if you find your monthly payments are under 10%, 8% of your gross monthly salary, then you're in a good spot. Even better if you have cash. So that's when it's time to buy. When you have a need, and more so than a want, your vehicle's unsafe, it's not roadworthy, and most importantly, you have the resources. See, because right now is not the time. It's not the time if you don't have all of those criteria met. And a lot of people get into the snookered and they overspend, and then they find themselves in a world of hurt later on. Why is the repossession rates up as high as they are? 7%, 8%. It's because people get in over their head. So when is it good time to buy right now? Sure, if you have the need, not the want, the need, and you have the funds, and you don't exceed those time frame criteria, okay? So that is the ultimate time to buy. Get all that behind you. Now we're talking about the economy, the environment itself. Is this a good time to buy? Well, in short, yes. As I've said, what we're looking at now is, number one, it's a race against the clock. If you need that vehicle, you've got the resources, and you've determined that you need that vehicle, yes, this is actually a better time than it would be in 3 or 4 years. Much better time than it would be in 10 years from now. If you're going to drag along that car and you think, okay, I'll get another 7 or 8 years out of this, it's clapped out jalopy, and then I'll get into my next one. Or should I maybe wait another year or two and then get into the next one? Or should I buy it today? See, there's different time frames, but it really boils down to, when do you see you needing that following vehicle? It's really a matter of leapfrog 2 vehicles down the road when we're in the midst of full electrification or full hybrid or technology overload that we haven't even seen yet. I mean, right now we're seeing cars that are extraordinarily expensive to maintain and repair and costly to look after. But you know as well as I do, it's only going to get worse. So it depends on your finances, depends on how many miles you put on, and it depends how quickly you wear out your vehicle. Right now could in fact be the best time to buy that car. We know every year it's going to get more and more expensive, and the differential, the delta between your funds, your resources, and the cost of that new car is going to increase, just like housing increases year over year. So it's not going to get any cheaper. The question is, do you want to beat the clock to what's coming around the corner? We don't know exactly what we're in for 2030, 2035, but this could in fact be the time. If you've been waiting and you're just kind of putting it off, here's the long and short of it is, you need something, and you're kind of done with the old clapped out, worn out stuff. Maybe you can't fix your own cars or trucks. This could in fact be the time to buy that new car. Again, they're not getting any cheaper. Anyway, please do drop a line down below. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Please drop a line as well. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share, like, and we'll see you all real soon. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.